Welcome to the Scott Townsend Show, brought to you by Dietzo Man Productions.
Hey, this is Scott Townsend, and today I have with me a good friend, an old friend. Old, I mean, we go way back.
That's right.
Chris Zervas, welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, buddy, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me today.
So we go back longer than high school. I mean, we were the last graduating class of college high. That was 82, and we're seriously dating ourselves here.
Yeah, you have to edit that out.
And of course, we knew each other before then too. But honestly, I don't think we may have bumped into each other once or twice since then. But I think this is the first time we've actually sat down and just, had a conversation. So
I think you're right. I knew about things you were doing. I knew you were always kind of on the edge in a good way, technologically.
A donkey on the edge.
Yeah. So I knew about things you were doing, but I don't know that I've seen much of you in a long time.
Yeah. So so let's get started here. So really how this all got started was while I was posting about looking for a job on LinkedIn and creating tutorials about how to use LinkedIn and stuff like that, Chris reached out through LinkedIn probably a month or so ago and said, "Hey, is there any way I can help? Let me know if there's, what I can do to help you." And that was super nice. I mean, that was people reaching out like that. Really, that was really encouraging. And so Chris and I were talking a little bit back and forth. And after I found out what he was doing and about this book he had wrote, I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this show. It's more of an experiment. Would you like to be on there and talk about the book and what you do?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I really appreciate your help and your reaching out. That was super generous. So thanks a lot for that.
Absolutely. Well, while we're there, tell me a little bit about how things are going with your job search. I know you got a lot of experience marketing wise and have done some great stuff.
No, so yes, so still looking after having been laid off. Some of the people here watching or listening to the show kind of know the story. And so, in the meantime, as I'm looking and applying and doing all this kind of stuff, I decided to start this show up so that I could show off what I can do as far as creating content, marketing the content, promoting the content, editing, interviewing skills, all that stuff. It's kind of like auditioning out in front of everybody,
Yeah,
in the hopes that somebody someday somewhere will see it and go, "Hey, I think we need more of that," So but you know what? I'm enjoying it so much that I think I would still keep doing this even after the, when I get hired again somewhere. I think I might still do it because I enjoy it so much. I've really enjoyed talking to people, listening to their stories. And just, I could do this. I could edit video for hours and, never even think about it. So, yeah. So there you go. That's kind of the genesis of this project. I call it the experiment because we'll see how it goes. But anyway, it's having a lot of fun with it. Well, let's throw it back over to you. This is your show, your hour, your whatever you need, Chris. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing these days.
Well, I have moved back to where we grew up, Scott, and I do corporate training, keynote speaking, and a little bit of coaching, just helping people communicate well. So we've had the opportunity to help a few judges recently prepare to sit before the judicial nominated commission. So that's been kind of fun on an interpersonal level. And then I teach leadership and communication skills to corporations and obviously coach individuals in that as well.
So I was really interested. I was excited to hear that because I've been wanting to write a book for a long time, and I've started writing my own little ebook, just a really short, small thing. But anyway, when I checked out your website and saw your book, here it is, Bomb-Proof Constructive Feedback. This really piqued my interest. What got you started on the book? And let's talk about your book and how it got started.
I was working with ConocoPhillips here in Bartlesville. And at that period of time, I don't know if they still do or not, but they were doing forced rankings. And so, as you know, I can see by your nod, forced rankings are, if I've got a team of 5 or 6 people and I'm giving my yearly reviews to them, I've got to give 20% of them a flunking grade. And even if I've got a team of all-stars, I've still got, based on forced rankings, to make some of them subterranean, if you will. And people were really stressed out about that. And so I provided some training for them on how to help people have great conversations that were difficult. And over time, we delivered the content a little bit. And I thought, you know what? I want to get a book done. And that was the genesis of really starting the book.
So the book's kind of half and half. The first half is more about the day-to-day management. Can you share a little bit more about the first half of the book and the day-to-day management?
Yeah, I can. You know, there's 3 types of feedback that people get. They get personalized feedback, they get pure feedback, and they get really poor feedback. And personalized feedback is feedback that is driven by me. I might say, I believe, I think, and for a lot of people that really works because they're motivated by pleasing an individual. One of the things that is advocated in the book is pure feedback. And pure feedback is more objective in nature. It's more statistically driven as opposed to my feelings or thoughts. So the first half of the book is, challenging people to begin to think about pure feedback in the first place and really looking for 2 things. How can I praise them and how can I correct them?
Why is feedback so hard for most everybody, the giver and the receiver? Why is it so tough?
Well, 40% of us by behavioral standards, and I know you just talked about taking some
assessments of
battery
behavioral
assessment. Yeah, that 40% of us, our biggest desire is that we're at peace with everybody around us. And that can become a flaw. It sure is for me. In that I want people to be happy with me more than I want to tell them the truth. But people appreciate honest correction more than they do flattery. And so if I'm a great manager, I'm looking for an opportunity, even if it's difficult for me, to correct people. In the long term, they love to be corrected. They love to be helped in their growth as an employee.
Yeah, that's so true. Unfortunately, it seems like the feedback is given I'm not sure how to say it. The feedback is given without much thought as to the person receiving it. And instead of it being an opportunity for this person to learn something about themselves, it becomes a me against you kind of conversation. I feel bad when you walk away. You feel bad when you walk out of the office. Taking it personally, reading more into what was said than what was really said. So how do you avoid that? I mean, so take us through a scenario maybe. What's the best way to help? Of course, it all depends on the individual too, I'm sure. Some people are really good at receiving feedback, and some people take everything personally. You've really got to know your people, I guess.
Well, I think you really drove the key nail in the frame of this thing for sure. And it really starts with who's my audience. So if I understand my audience, I understand how I'm going to do this with whoever's on my team. So if I've got one person that I can simply kind of look at in a different fashion and that will correct them, then I've got to be really gentle with them. I've got a buddy who tells a story about going to dinner with his wife, and he had a difficult conversation that day with one of his employees, and he and his wife were talking, and she took a bite of food, and he told her what had happened that day, and she choked. She said, "You said that to him?" And he said, "Honey, I've been trying to tell him this for 3 months, and he just didn't get it." And so really our audience is what drives every piece of correction. And so the main thing we need to really think out before we do any kind of correction is, who is my audience?
So the real key for correction, what's the goal here? Is because you're trying to develop your team, I guess, is the goal here. You're trying to elevate and support the people that are working for you, really, to go on to do bigger and better things than even you. Of course, that takes a lot of confidence on the leader's part.
Absolutely. And you know, our goal is for people to mature, and they're going to grow in their performance and, frankly, their loyalty to their company. And so the way we really do that is balancing attention between praise and correction. But researchers tell us that when people make progress, that's the greatest motivator. And if we can recognize their progress, that's the piece of praise that motivates people. I worked on a boys ranch for a while, and my buddy that ran it said, "Man, catch them doing right." And I think that's such a great phrase, is that, you know, a lot of us, like me, I tend to be more critical than I want to be. And
me both.
Yeah, I correct people from doing wrong as opposed to looking to opportunities saying, "Man, that was fantastic. You know, your report looks tremendous, and my boss loved it, and I let him know that you spent a long time doing this," or whatever it is.
Right. You know, I was just, when I hear that kind of line of thinking, I always think of kids, especially little kids that want to play basketball, for example. And so they've got this basketball that's bigger than they are, and they've got this goal that's 8 feet up in the air or something like that, you know, and they're never going to get the basketball in the goal. And so they spend so many years trying to get the basketball up into the goal. And I heard Seth Godin say one time, the marketing guy, I don't know if you know who Seth Godin is. He was saying, why don't we lower the goal so that the goal is like 2 feet off the ground, and just let them taste some wins, you know, just let them easily put the basketball in the goal, and then slowly over time start raising the goal as they grow older. And and instead of being, you know, because after a while, if the goal's 8 feet tall and you try for a while to get the ball in the goal, you're just probably going to give up, because, you know, it's never going to happen. Yeah, but if you give them some taste of success and let them see some progress, maybe they'll stick with it longer. They'll have a greater sense of accomplishment. I think that goes along with what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, looking for them to have success, I think, is a key point for us as leaders. It's like fertilizer. You know, if we looked at this, and that's the analogy we use in the book, is it's like a tree, and it can bear fruit. And one of the things is that we've got to prune it. Trees that are pruned ultimately bear more fruit. And we've got to weed out things that are wrong, prune branches that are in need of it, and ultimately they'll grow. There's some researchers that I refer to, and their research has actually been debunked. But I think in what they wanted to prove, I think provides some lessons for us. And there was a guy named Dr. Gottman out of Denver, and this guy's legit. These guys I'm going to tell you about in a second were debunked. But Dr. Gottman said that if a marriage is going to survive, it's got to have a ratio of 5-to-1 positive to negative interactions. And I think that's just great information. Some guys named Fredrickson and Losada applied it to the workplace. And they found that the ratio needed to be greater than 3-to-1 and less than 13-to-1, meaning that if every time I encountered my employee, every other time I had something negative to say, it would really move them away. But in the same sense, if 14-to-1, or every time I saw them, I was always saying they were great, then they would be like, my boss is just always blue sky and there's no correction. And frankly, people don't appreciate that.
Right.
So I think we need to look at a balance like Dr. Gottman proved in marriage, and these guys addressed with their research, that we're looking for people's good efforts and an opportunity to praise them over always trying to correct them, because it just beats them down. Absolutely.
On the second half of the book, you were talking about receiving feedback. Let's say you're my boss and you're giving me feedback. And if I'm going to accept it, doesn't trust have a lot to do with it? I mean, if I know your heart's in the right place and you're truly wanting me to develop and groom me for the next level, that's one thing. How do you develop that trust with your employees so that they buy into what you're giving them?
No, Scott, you're exactly right. And I think time is a piece of that. Character is a piece of that. Employees are watching to see, are their bosses men of character? Are they, or women of character? Are they people who are kind of balancing that tension we talked about? Because if all I get is correction, I know that's all you're looking for. But if you're legitimately, as you're saying, find some ways to truly praise me, I can recognize that this guy's telling the truth all the time. He praises me when things are right. He corrects me when things are wrong. And delivery is huge. I can choose to respond in my anger, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in the second half of the book. But delivery is a key piece of that. So I've got to make sure that I'm preparing myself to deliver it in a fashion that makes it receivable.
So let's go to the second half of the book. So what is it in the book there that talks about, or how do employees have confidence in difficult situations, or employers? How do they develop confidence having difficult conversations or situations?
Yeah, well, I think the first part as of the book kind of sets the stage for that, Scott, because it talks about, I can wait for 6 months to give a review, and then I've got all this stuff piled up, and then I just kind of blow up and shoot it all on them. Or I can look at them. You remember the old book, The 1 Minute Manager?
Right. Kim Blanchard, was it?
Absolutely. Ken Blanchard had a book called The 1 Minute Manager. I guess he still does. But it's been around a long time. But he just says, we correct people, we praise people moment by moment, day by day. So we're either fertilizing them or weeding them moment by moment and day by day. If I do that, I don't have this big pile of things that I'm taking at an interview. And we've all been in interviews where people suddenly surprise us with, what?
Yeah.
Where'd that come from? That was 4 months ago or whatever.
Right. Performance reviews where someone brings up something that you'd totally forgotten about.
Yeah. And so if we're wise in our moment by moment, day by day leadership of our employees, then these conversations, first of all, aren't difficult because you've already had the simple conversation right then. So we catch them doing right, immediately praise them. We catch them doing wrong, immediately correct them. And then these conversations don't become as difficult. So that's the base that really establishes what would happen. And then there's 4 steps that are outlined in bomb-proof constructive feedback about really walking through a decision tree about addressing.
So let me stop you there, right there. We're going to take a break just for a second. And then when we come back, we'll jump into those 4 steps. So
that sounds great. Thank you, Scott.
The Scott Townsend Show.
All right, so we're back, and Chris, you were just getting ready to talk about the 4 steps of a, quote, decision tree. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So we talked about the base of being a day-to-day leadership of employees. And then, but if somebody just really hasn't gotten it, and you've tried all kinds of things. Then I outline in Bomb-Proof Constructive Feedback kind of a 4-part decision tree that walks through a difficult conversation. And I'll go ahead and tell you the first one, and if we can chat about that. But the first one is really related to me. And, you know, a lot of times we project our important things onto others around us. Let me give you an example. So when we were growing up, Scott, fear was probably the biggest enemy in my life. I was afraid of everything.
You were too? Oh my God, I was afraid. I thought I was the only one who was afraid of everything.
Oh my gosh, it like crippled my life. And so now with people that I lead, when I see them respond in fear, it's sort of, that's the last thing I want them to do, because I know how much it took from me. And so the first piece is really to take a personal inventory. And for some of us, you know, we're either a fighter or a runner. And for those of us that are runners, which I tend to be with conflict, I've got to toe the line and address people that are not acting correctly. And as we talked about before, frankly, people appreciate that. And for those that are fighters, do you tend to be more of a runner or a fighter in conflict, Scott?
Probably a runner. I try to avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to diffuse it, get away from it. I really don't want to get messy and in the middle of it all.
Yeah. So all of us are really one or the other. Speaking to audiences, when you ask this question, you know, you'll get half people say, man, bring it. I'll fight you right now.
Right.
So those kind of people just need to make sure that it's not about them. They haven't had a good argument today. And that's sort of like their coffee, and they need that. So we've got to ask ourselves, who am I? The old prophet James said, what causes fights and quarrels among you? And it's our selfish desires. So we look at things from our own lens. And Carl Jung said this. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I got to make sure that it's not about me, that it's really about them and how I can help them grow, and how they can become a better contributor and more loyal to my company.
So that so you, as the employer, as the boss, we'll just use that word. Instead of it being personal, how do you objectify it? I mean, you have, instead of attacking attacking the individual, how do you stay objective and help them understand this isn't about you? I'm not saying you're a bad person. It's just that the report was turned in 2 days late. Let's talk about that.
Well, you did exactly right. You ask a question. So the first thing is that I found that if I'll wait a while, I can be way more objective. I mean, think of it as an email that you typed off when you're ticked and you're like, I can't believe I just said that. You know, or you said something in anger. So if we wait with our employees until our anger has subsided, then we find ourselves in a lot better position to have a gracious, caring, them-centered conversation. And the second thing is you ask a question, and that's really it. A great, difficult conversation like a employee review where there's some difficult things or somebody needs to be addressed. And this is pruning, but the tree has a part in it as well. And so rather than us just lecture them, it needs to be a back and forth. And the back and forth is really asking questions that are led with I, as opposed to accusatory led with you. So I just want to understand, you know, I'd like to know kind of what happened. You mentioned a report. Help me understand why the report that is a weekly event that you're having trouble getting that done every week. I want to understand what's going on.
Right.
So if I act like a detective, CSI, just gathering the facts, what happens is I either figure out, you know what, I really do have a case against this person, or I figure out, you know what, for some reason where they live out in the country and remote work, every Friday afternoon, and they can send me the report from their internet provider, but their internet goes down, or, I'm making something up, but
Right.
But there's a valid excuse that I can learn. And I think it goes back to Covey says, seek first to understand. So we're interrogative, be interrogative. And with I want to understand as opposed to be accusing.
So that goes back to, then the leader really is a really good leader is a person who's trying to help remove the hurdles so that you can do a good job. But if he or she doesn't know you have this recurring problem maybe, and they just, instead of jumping on you, they take the time to find out why. They may find out, do a little digging, you may find out they're caring for elderly parents that are dying, or hospice, or I'm also making some stuff up here. But you find out there's some stuff going on that is really tripping them up. And what is it that I can do to help them be more successful?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're exactly right. Exactly right. And that just comes from listening.
Yeah.
And, if you're like me, I can't wait for people to shut up so I can share everything I know. Stephen Covey says, most of us listen with the intent to reply rather than the intent to understand. And part of this process of giving great feedback is choosing to listen. I'm going to make a choice. Hearing is an act of the senses. Listening is an act of the will. So I've got to make a choice to be a listener. Wow.
And active listening. As a matter of fact, I'm posting an interview with Shanita Woodard today, this Friday today. She was also talking about the power of active listening, which is so. I didn't plan for this to happen. 2 weeks in a row we'll be talking about active listening. But yeah, it's a contact sport almost. I mean, if you really want to practice listening skills, it's not easy. I mean, I would set my son down every so often. We would have a meeting, and I would tell him, especially in his teenage years, I would say, this hour is for you. We're going to sit here. We're going to have a meeting, and this is a safe harbor. You can say anything you want, because, kids, when they're 14, 15, 16, I mean, they're getting bombarded with all kinds of stuff, and they don't know up from down. So for the first time, it was very awkward. He wasn't quite sure what to say. But over time, he grew to trust that I wouldn't jump in, that I wouldn't, well, this is what you need to do, As your father, let me tell you what you need to do. It was just a time for him to talk and for me to listen and not say a word. And it was so hard. You could see the answer. You knew what the answer was, and you want to jump in and go, well, I'll tell you what, if you do this and if you do that, then everything's, but it was so hard to just. But over time, it was easier. It grew easier to do that, to be quiet. But if you're not quiet, you're not going to be able to hear what's really going on with them, and that takes time and patience, and
and think of, I think about myself with people who have led me, and the people that I enjoyed working with the most were people that listened to me. You talked about, how do I build trust? How do I put myself in a situation where they know I really care about them? And I think that's one of the cornerstones of making that happen, would just be a great listener.
So you mentioned 4 steps. We went through the first 2. Did you hit on number 3 yet?
I've not. And number 3 is, if I figure out, first of all, that it's not about me, it's not my issue. Number 2, that I've asked some great questions, and they have convicted themselves, if you will, by their answers, then it's time to really confront them. And I think we need to be in a position to understand where might they go and what do we need to do. And so let's talk kind of in reverse order. What do we need to do? Well, we really need to be specific, number one, about, 4 out of the last 5 times the report that's due on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock has been late. And it was late 12 minutes, it was late 14 hours, it was late 6 minutes, and it was late 7 hours. So, I think we're really specific, and we look at how do we give that. Remember, we talked about pure feedback or personalized feedback. That's pure feedback that just says, hey, this isn't really about me. This is just the rules and how we get it done.
These are the facts.
These are the facts. And I think we also want to be really careful that this is done privately. We're not announcing this in front of our whole team. One of the times that I taught this corporately, a gal raised her hand and said, you know what, I lead a lot of very sensitive people. And I have found that the best time to have these conversations is late in the day, so they can go home and have an entire, night to kind of get themselves back together before they get to work. So we want to make sure that, hey, I need to talk to you, and I got a phone call in 5 minutes, but let me jump down your throat for 5 minutes. We got to schedule some time where there's not interruptions for that to happen. And then secondly, I think we need to think about where might this go. And when I finished college, my dad said to me, hey, I think you ought to go to grad school. And I said, I don't want to go to school anymore. I've had enough. And we had this back and forth, and I was young and dumb and full of bubble gum. And he said, do you have a job lined up for the summer? And I said, well, I do at the end of the summer. He goes, what are you doing at the beginning? I go, well, I don't have anything yet. And he goes, well, let me get you a job. I was like, okay, that's great. I need just X amount of time because my job starts midsummer. And so he got me a job at a ranch in Pawhuska. And every morning while it was still dark, my recently graduated right hand was holding a shovel. And my boss took me out to this giant stall. This was a huge ranch, like 23,000 acres. And the stall was humongous. And every day in the dark, I shoveled manure. And I'd look at my watch, and thinking, man, it's got to be like almost time for lunch. And I'd been shoveling and it'd be like 8:17. I'd just been there forever.
Yeah.
But that's the way every morning was shoveling manure. But every afternoon we always did something fun. And like we would build a pen for a cutting show horse or horse show. We would move cattle from pasture to pasture. We dehorned cattle, give them shots. My funnest thing was moving cattle from pasture to pasture.
Yeah.
And we were riding along one day, and my boss said to me, hey, where might these cows go? And I was like, heck, I don't know. I mean, I was like, city slickers. And so he goes, well, see that little break in the brush right there? You might ride up there to make sure that they go the way we go. And I think as we prepare for these difficult conversations, we've got to be prepared. Where might they go? Because as you shared, they're going to blame it on all kinds of things. Your reasons were great, but they might blame, well, you're a terrible boss, or my mom taught me, or whatever. But it's really just back to them. It's about you. But we got to be ready to cut them off wherever they're going to go. So the confrontation requires a lot of preparation. It requires thinking about where they're going to go. It requires not just being a speaker, but a listener, and getting ready for that absolute truthful piece of information.
That's really good. So was this in high school when you was that in high school or after high school?
That was after college.
Oh, after
And,
college.
Yeah. So the follow-up is the next fall, I started enrolling in grad school. So my dad's best friend at the time was the guy who hired me, and they were in cahoots, and I was shoveling manure.
So it worked.
It worked. It worked.
It reminds me of the story about the little kid shoveling manure in the stall, and he's very enthusiastic, and the guy says, "Why are you so enthusiastic about shoveling all that manure?" And he said, "With all this manure in here, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere."
That's exactly right. Well, my pony was grad school. My dad was a smart guy.
Yeah.
So
Go to number 4 if we haven't already. Can you talk about number 4?
absolutely. So number 4 is really to look to the future. I mean, this is about a behavior and not somebody's personality. But if I have great conflict with somebody and I treat it right, and I've listened and I've told them the truth in a gracious fashion, then it's going to create connection. And it's going to create an employee who is interested in serving our team, being more loyal, and being more productive. Because as we talked about earlier, people appreciate honest correction better than flattery. So the 4th thing is just looking to the future for them and saying, you know what, I'm so glad you're on my team. And together we're going to go forward. And the book talks about several things. I mean, it might reveal that they need greater coaching. It might reveal that they need counseling or discipline, or frankly, they might need to be dismissed. But all of those are looking forward for the best interest of that person. Dismissal at times is a great thing for people because they figure out, you know what, I lost a job and I figured out I hate this kind of work. I want to do, and it led me to what I'm doing now, which I love. Mm-hmm. So all of those things are looking forward to the best interest of the person. And I think that needs to be our attitude. It's not about me winning and them losing. It's about, how do I make this great for them? What can I do in their life to make them a better employee or get them on the different bus or a different seat in the bus?
Well, and it also makes it great for you too, because you're growing your team and developing your team, which ultimately makes your job easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Chris, if anybody wants more information about you and your keynoting and coaching, how do they get more information?
They can go to chriszervas.com. There's tons of information there. There's a few little sample videos and there's a few blog posts and different things. And certainly they can contact me from there and we can chat about their needs.
So the book is Bomb-Proof Constructive Feedback. It's a great book. It's a quick read. I think in 2 sittings I got through it, and it's really got some great information that Chris talked about today. So, well, Chris, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us and being on the show. It was great having you.
No, buddy, it's my pleasure. Thanks for letting me a part of it, and blessings to you in your search and your show. All
right. Well, thanks, Chris. And so for more information on Chris, we'll post at the end of the show here. For Chris Zervas, this is Scott Townsend, and thanks for watching the Scott Townsend Show. We'll check you guys later.
The Scott Townsend Show is a Dietzo Man production. For more episodes, visit the Scott Townsend Show YouTube channel, listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.